The council voted to abandon them. Then a human warship thundered out of the void. The chamber breathes, but nothing in it is alive. A low hum rises from the ventilation shafts set high in the walls of the grand concourse. The architects of the interstellar compact designed it that way. The sound is not meant to cool the room. It is meant to make the room feel occupied, to make the empty seats seem less empty, to make the silence between votes feel like pause rather than ending. The hum has a rhythm, an exhale, a false lung. The light in the chamber comes from above, not from fixtures that a human would recognize. The ceiling is a single curved surface of pale stone that catches and spreads illumination from sources hidden in the architecture. During sessions, it glows with a steady white that erases shadows. Now, with the delegates gone, it has dimmed to a gray that makes the room feel larger than it is. The seats, tiered in concentric arcs, rise into that gray and vanish. There are 847 of them. Each one is sized for a different species. The smallest, near the outer rim, would fit a human child. The largest, at the center, would hold a Vren with room to spare. All of them are empty. The air smells of polished stone and recycled oxygen. The temperature is exactly 22 degrees, maintained for species whose biology requires precision. A human would find it slightly cool. Tanako Duya does not shiver. She does not pull her uniform jacket closed. She sits with her hands flat on the table, palms down, fingers spread, as if she is holding the surface in place. The stone is cold against her palms. She does not move them. Her breathing is slow, measured, the kind of breathing a person learns when they have spent years in places where air is rationed and silence is the only currency that matters. Admiral Yuki Tanako Duya, retired, sits alone at the human delegation's table. She has not moved in 6 hours. The concourse was built to accommodate the compact's tallest member species. The Vren stand 4 meters at the shoulder. Their chairs rise like thrones. Their tables sit at chest height. The human chair is too low. The table edge cuts across her ribs. The acoustics were engineered so that voices from the central dais boom against the curved ceiling and roll outward like thunder. Voices from the edges, where humanity sits, flatten and die against the sound dampeners built into the floor. She does not adjust her posture. She does not ask for a cushion. She has been sitting like this for 6 hours, and her knees have begun to ache in a way she does not acknowledge. Her hands rest on the table, empty. The paper pad she carried all day is gone. She left it somewhere, or she did not bring it. It is hard to tell with her. She wears the same uniform she has worn for 20 years, retired or not, navy blue with no insignia. The fabric at the collar is worn thin from washing. Her hair, gray at the temples, is pulled back in a knot that has loosened slightly over the hours. She does not fix it. A single clerk enters through the side passage. It is a kethmorph, barely 30 centimeters tall, its body segmented and low to the ground. It moves on 6 jointed legs that make no sound against the polished stone. The kethmorph carry recording tablets everywhere they go. Their function is to witness, to document, to preserve what the spoken word forgets. This one has come to collect the voting tablets from the day's session. It stops 3 meters from the human table. It sees her. Its primary eyes, compound and faceted, do not blink the way human eyes blink, but its antennae still. Its legs pause mid-step. It hesitates. The clerk has worked in the concourse for 11 years. It has seen delegates weep. It has seen them shout. It has seen one species threaten another with a weapon that the compact's security systems disintegrated before the sentence ended. It has never seen a human sit alone at a too small table for 6 hours after a vote that went against them. The kethmorph do not speak in the chambers. They are not permitted, but they see everything, and what they see, they record. The clerk looks at the voting tablet on the floor beside her chair. It looks at her. She does not look back. She is staring at the empty dais where the speaker sat, her eyes open but not focused on anything the clerk can measure. The clerk makes a decision. It turns and leaves the tablet where it is, on the polished stone beside her chair, and scuttles back the way it came. Its record of this moment will be filed under the day's session number. It will not be flagged. It will not be reviewed, but it will exist. The kethmorph record everything. That is their function. That is their power. That is the only power they have. The rewind begins. 12 12 hours earlier. The vote was not close. 847 delegates sat in the tiered rows that rose from the central floor like the inside of a shell. 612 voted in favor of quarantine. 235 voted against. The human colony on Kepler 442b, population 11,247, was to be severed from all supply lanes, all communication relays, all transit corridors. A buffer quarantine, the Vren speaker called it. The colony had reported an anomalous biological signature in their soil surveys. Not dangerous, the human scientists insisted. Merely unfamiliar. But unfamiliarity in the compact's biological statutes was grounds for isolation until classification could be completed. Classification, the speaker noted, would take as long as required. The human delegate, Admiral Tanako Duya, had not objected during the debate. She had listened. She had taken notes on a paper pad, an affectation the Vren found quaint, the Kethmorph found fascinating. The pad was old, the kind of thing a person might buy in a station market for less than the cost of a meal. The pages were thin and yellow at the edges. She wrote with a pen that required pressure, not a stylus that recorded automatically. The Kethmorph clerks, who documented every word spoken in the concourse through their tablets, would pause in their work to watch her hand move across the page. They did not understand why a species with access to perfect recording technology would choose imperfection. They found it beautiful. They found it strange. They found it human. She had carried the pad for 30 years. It had been a gift from her husband, a man who worked with wood and paper in a time when most people worked with light and data. He had died 12 years ago on a colony not unlike Kepler 442b. She had not replaced the pad. She had not copied its contents. When the pages filled, she bought another identical pad and continued. The Kethmorph clerks knew this. They had watched her through 11 years of sessions. They knew the sound her pen made. They knew the way she turned pages with her left hand while writing with her right. They knew she was left-handed, a fact that seemed to interest them more than her rank ever had. When the vote was called, she recorded the tally with the same pen. 612 to 235. She underlined it twice. The motion passed. The chamber began to empty. Delegates rose, robes rustled, feet shuffled. The Vren speaker, Orvelk, who had served 40 years in the chair, gathered his tablets and prepared to descend from the dais. Then she stood. Speaker. Her voice did not carry. The acoustics swallowed it. The word reached perhaps the first 2 rows and then flattened into the dampeners. She did not repeat herself. She did not raise her volume. She simply stood, waiting, her hands at her sides, until Orvelk, who had already turned toward the exit passage, felt the weight of her stillness and turned back. He leaned forward. His secondary eyelids flickered, a Vren sign of irritation. Admiral. Speaker, she said, at exactly the same volume. I request the floor under Article 17, Section 4 of the Compact Charter. The right of a member species to address the Assembly after a vote of quarantine, before the order is formally entered into the record. Silence. The clerk scribes paused. The remaining delegates, halfway to the exits, stopped. Article 17, Section 4 was a relic from the Compact's founding, included as a courtesy to the founding species who feared majority tyranny. It had been invoked 11 times in 340 years. 9 of those times the delegate had simply made a speech of protest and sat down. The Assembly had learned to treat it as theater, a formality, a last breath before the inevitable. The 10th time, 217 years ago, a delegate from the Ool had used the clause to sing a mourning hymn for a colony lost to a stellar flare. The singing lasted 6 minutes. The vote was entered anyway, but the clerk scribes had recorded the hymn. It was still in the archives. The Ool remembered. The Compact did not. Orvelk granted it. The floor is yours, Admiral, briefly. Tanako Duya did not move from her place. She did not approach the dais. She remained at the too low table in the too small chair, and she reached into her jacket. She withdrew a single folded paper. She placed it on the table. She did not open it. 11,247, she said. That is the population of Kepler 442b. I will name them, all of them. I have the list. It will take about 4 hours and 20 minutes. The chamber stirred, not with alarm, with impatience. A low murmur ran through the Vren delegation, the heavy shifting of 4-meter bodies in chairs built for them. Orvelk's secondary eyelids flickered again, faster this time. "Admiral, this is not Article 17, Section 4, she said, still at the same volume, contains no time limit. It was designed to ensure that no species could be silenced by procedural speed. The founders understood that erasure often moves faster than memory. She looked at the paper. "I will begin with the infants. There are 312 children under the age of 2. Their names are short, then the school registry, then the adults, then the elderly. The last name will take the longest. Alara Vosmensa, she is 97. She was born in Lagos, Earth. She helped build the first atmospheric processor on 442b. She is blind now. She tells stories to the children. She will not understand why the ship stopped coming." Orvelk rose. His full height cast a shadow across the central floor. "This is obstruction. The vote has passed." "The vote has passed," Tanako Duya agreed. "I am not obstructing the vote. I am exercising my right. The order cannot be entered into the record until I yield the floor. I do not yield." She began to read. Hour 1. The names were not shouted. They were not dramatized. She read them as one might read a weather report or a medical chart or a cargo manifest. Each name was followed by a single detail: an age, an occupation, a place of origin. Myra Chen, 34, hydrologist, Ganymede. David Okafor, 6, student, Kepler 442b. Sato Yuki, 8, student, Kepler 442b. The acoustics still flattened her voice, but something in the chamber had stopped shifting. The delegates who had been leaving settled back into their seats. Not because they were interested, because they were waiting to see if she would stop. The Kethmorph clerks who had been preparing to depart settled back into their alcoves. They recorded everything. It was their function. One of them, the same clerk who would later hesitate in the empty chamber, placed its tablet on the floor beside its alcove and sat very still. Its antennae did not move. Its eyes did not shift. It listened. A delegate from the minor species, the Ool, who held no voting power but attended by ancient treaty, raised a sensory appendage. Not to speak. The Ool do not speak in assembly. Their communication is chemical and tactile, invisible to most species. But to listen, to attend, to be present. It was a small movement, a pale tendril rising from the gallery where the non-voting species sat above the main floor. No one noticed it except Tanako Duya, who paused for exactly 3 seconds after reading the name, Sato Yuki, 8, student, Kepler 442b, and nodded, almost imperceptibly, in the Ool's direction. The child shared her grandmother's name. Hour 2. The reading continued. The names became a rhythm, a pulse. The chamber had never held sound like this. Not debate, not argument, not the booming pronouncements of speakers. Just names, facts. The simple weight of human lives rendered in the flattest possible voice against acoustics designed to make them disappear. Tomas Reyes, 52, soil analyst, Mars. He found the anomalous signature. He named it. He thought it was beautiful. Amara Osai, 29, teacher, Kepler 442b. She keeps a garden of earth plants in the habitat dome. The tomatoes are finally growing. Jinho Park, 71, retired engineer, Luna. He built the first relay station on 442b. He tells anyone who listens that the sunsets there are the color of burnt copper. Layla Farouk, 14, student, Kepler 442b. She wants to be a pilot. She has drawn maps of the colony in her notebook. The maps are more accurate than the official surveys. Wei Zhang, 41, mechanic, Earth. He fixes the water recyclers. He hums while he works. No one has been able to identify the tune. Nia Okonkwo, 3, infant, Kepler 442b. She was born during the first harvest. Her mother says she smiled before she cried. The Vren delegation began to murmur, not about the reading, about the time. The quarantine order was scheduled to transmit at 1800 standard. The relay ships were already positioned. A delay would cost fuel. Scheduling. Face. Orvelk had remained in his chair, his massive frame still, his robes with their gravity-assist threads hanging motionless. He watched her. His three-pronged vocal chamber, capable of subsonic harmonics that could shake stone, was silent. A junior Vren delegate, one of the younger members of the delegation who had not yet learned the patience of 40 years in the chair, leaned toward an elder and whispered. The whisper carried in the silence. The acoustics, designed to flatten edge voices, had never been tested against a room so quiet. The whisper reached the human table. Tanako Duya did not look up. She turned a page. The paper made a soft crack. The sound carried. Yuki Tanako Duya, 1 infant, Kepler 442b. She paused. Her pen hovered over the paper. Then she continued. Zara Mensa, 45, medic, Lagos, Earth. She delivered 23 babies on 442b. She keeps a photograph of each one. The UL delegate's sensory appendage remained raised. It had not moved in over an hour. Other UL scattered through the gallery began to shift, not to leave, to settle more deeply into their seats, to lean forward, to attend. One of them, an older specimen with markings that suggested age in a species whose biology the compact still did not fully understand, extended a second appendage. Then a third. The gesture meant nothing in the voting assembly. The UL had no votes. But in their own culture, the extension of multiple sensory tendrils in a shared space was a sign of collective witness, of bearing weight that was not yours to bear, of saying silently, "We see you, we hear you, we are here." The tendrils glowed faintly in the dim light of the gallery, a pale blue that no other species in the chamber could see. The UL did not need them to see it. They knew what they were doing. They had waited 217 years for someone to sing again. Hour 3. The reading continued. The names did not stop. The rhythm had become something else now. Not a list. A wall. A structure built of sound that filled the space where argument had failed. The acoustics still flattened Tanako Duya's voice at the edges, but the silence in the chamber had changed. It was no longer the silence of a room emptying. It was the silence of a room holding its breath. Marcus Webb, 38, botanist, Earth. He is trying to grow rice in the low-gravity section. He says the first crop tasted like home. Aisha Patel, 19, student, Kepler 442b. She wants to study the anomalous signature. She thinks it might be a new kind of life. She has written 3 papers no one has read. Elena Vasquez, 62, administrator, Mars. She keeps the colony's birth records. She knows every name on this list by heart. She has never met most of them. Kofi Asant, 7, student, Kepler 442b. He draws pictures of Earth animals he has never seen. His favorite is the elephant. He thinks they are as big as Vren. Rosa Lindgren, 54, chemist, Earth. She makes the medicine that keeps Ilara Vosmensa alive. She visits her every Tuesday. They talk about Lagos. Samuel Okonkwo, 11, student, Kepler 442b. He wants to build ships. He has made a model of the colony out of boxes and tape. It sits on his desk at school. Priya Sharma, 33, engineer, Earth. She designed the solar grid. She says the light on 442b is different. It has a weight to it. She misses rain. James Ockhaffer, 44, teacher, Earth. He teaches the children about oceans. He has never seen one. He says he will take his class to Earth someday. He has saved the money. It is in a box under his bed. The box has a picture of a whale on it. He cut the picture out of a book that came on the last supply ship. The Vren delegation's murmur had become something else. Not quite conversation, not quite protest, a restlessness. The kind of sound a large body makes when it wants to move but cannot find the direction. Orvelk had not descended from the dais again. He sat in his chair, his secondary eyelids opening and closing in a slow rhythm that was not quite a blink. When he was irritated, they flickered. When he was thinking, they moved slowly. They were moving slowly now. He approached Tanako Duya's table. It was a gesture of condescension, the physical act of a 4-meter Vren stooping to a human chair. His shadow fell across her list. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet. The acoustics did not flatten it. He was close enough that they did not need to. "Admiral, you are embarrassing yourself. No one is listening." Tanako Duya did not look up from the list. She was in the agricultural section now. The names of farmers, botanists, people who had made dirt live on a world that did not want them. "I am not reading for you, Speaker. I am reading for the record. The Kethmorph record everything. The record is the only thing that survives votes." She turned the page. Tomas Reyes, 52, soil analyst, Mars. He found the anomalous signature. He named it. He thought it was beautiful. Orvelk's shadow did not move. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he straightened. His joints made a sound, audible in the silence, the sound of a body that had held one position too long. He returned to the dais. He did not call for order. He did not call for a recess. He simply sat and waited and listened to the names. The chamber had stopped shifting. No one rose, no one spoke, no one left. The Kethmorph clerk who had hesitated in the empty chamber 6 hours from now did something unprecedented. It placed its recording tablet on the table beside Tanako Duya's list. Not to stop her, to be closer to the sound, to capture the names without the flattening acoustics. It was a small act, a clerk 30 centimeters tall aligning its neutral recording device with a human delegate's voice. It was seen. The Ool saw it. The Vren saw it. The record saw it. Tanako Duya did not react. She did not acknowledge the tablet. She simply continued reading, her voice flat and unhurried, as if the most natural thing in the world was to have a Kethmorph clerk place its primary recording device beside her paper list in the grand concourse of the interstellar compact. Alara Vosmensa, 97, atmospheric engineer, Lagos, Earth. Kepler 442b. She was getting close to the end of the agricultural section. The names were running out. The list was finite. The reading was inevitable. And the chamber, for the first time in 340 years, was listening. Hour 3 continued. The names did not stop. Tanako Duya's voice had not changed in volume or pitch since the first hour. It was the same flat register, the same unhurried pace, the same rhythm of fact after fact after fact. The acoustics still flattened her words at the edges, still sent them dying into the floor dampeners, but the chamber had changed around the sound. The silence between names had grown heavier. The delegates who had settled back into their seats no longer shifted. The Vren delegation's murmur had faded to something closer to listening. Fatima Al-Rashid, 27, botanist, Earth. She is trying to grow wheat in the high-gravity section. The first stalk came up last week. She took a photograph. It is the only photograph she has taken in 3 years. Omar Hassan, 9, student, Kepler 442b. He is learning to play the flute. His teacher is a recording from Earth. He practices in the airlock because the sound echoes. Lena Volkov, 56, geologist, Mars. She mapped every cave system on 442b. She says the planet is hollow in places. She has named the caves after her grandchildren. None of them have visited. The Kethmorph clerk had not moved its tablet from the table beside Tanako Duya's list. It sat motionless, its compound eyes fixed on the paper, its antennae barely twitching. Other clerks in other alcoves had begun to do the same. One by one, they placed their tablets on the floor beside their stations and sat in the same posture. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them was permitted to. But the gesture was unmistakable. They were aligning their recording devices with the human voice. They were choosing to capture the names without the flattening acoustics. They were choosing to hear her directly. The Ool delegation had grown. 7 had become 12. 12 had become 19. They stood in a loose semicircle behind the human table, their sensory tendrils extended, their pale blue bioluminescence barely visible in the chamber's white light. They did not block the view of any voting delegate. They did not make a sound. They simply stood and attended and witnessed. A delegate from the Ith, a minor voting species with 3 rotating seats, leaned toward its neighbor and whispered something. The whisper was not about the time. It was not about the relay ships. It was about the Ool. They have not stood in assembly since the founding, the Ith delegate said. Its neighbor, a senior member of the Vren delegation, did not respond. Its secondary eyelids were open. They were not flickering. Orvelk had not moved from his chair in over an hour. His massive frame was still, his gravity-assist robes hanging motionless, his 3-pronged vocal chamber silent. He watched Tanako Duya. He watched the Kethmorph clerks. He watched the Ool. He did not watch the clock. The clock had become irrelevant. The quarantine order had missed its transmission window. The relay ships had returned to standby. The 1800 standard deadline had come and gone without announcement, without protest, without anyone in the chamber noting its passing except the clerk scribes, who recorded it as they recorded everything. Hour 4. The list had moved into the elderly. The names were longer here, the details more sparse. Many of the colonists in this section had been born on Earth, on Luna, on Mars. They had come to Kepler 442b late in life, carrying memories of places the younger colonists had never seen. Their stories were shorter because their time on the colony was shorter, but their names were heavier. They carried the weight of origins. Henry Oduya, 89, retired pilot, Lagos, Earth. He is Tanaka Oduya's uncle. He taught her to fly. He has not flown in 12 years. He says the colony is enough. Tanaka Oduya's voice did not falter. She did not pause longer for this name than for any other, but the clerk scribes recorded the fact. The Kethmorph clerk beside her table recorded it. The Ool recorded it in their chemical memory, a form of storage no other species could access or erase. The chamber recorded it in the weight of the silence that followed. Margaret Chen, 91, retired teacher, Earth. She taught on 3 colonies before 442b. She says this one has the best sunsets. She has written a book about them. No one has published it. David Acaffer, 82, retired engineer, Earth. He is David Acaffer's grandfather. He built the first school on 442b. He still visits every week to tell the children about Earth. The names continued. The rhythm held. The chamber had become a different kind of space. Not a deliberative body. Not a voting assembly. A room where 11,247 people were being pulled out of abstraction and into specificity, one, by a voice that would not stop until every one of them had been named. Hour 4, 10 minutes. The Vren delegation had stopped murmuring entirely. The junior delegate who had whispered earlier sat with its hands flat on its table, mirroring Tanaka Oduya's posture without seeming to realize it. The senior delegate sat in the same stillness. No one checked a tablet. No one consulted a schedule. The room had become a single point of attention, focused on the too-low table at the edge of the floor, where a retired human admiral read names from a paper list in a voice the acoustics were designed to erase. Orvelk stood. He did not rise quickly. His movements were slow, deliberate, the movements of a body that had held one position for too long. His joints made the same sound they had made earlier, the audible creak of cartilage and gravity-assist threads strained beyond their design. He walked to the edge of the dais. He did not descend. He simply stood there, 4 meters tall, and looked down at the human table. Tanaka Oduya did not look up. She turned a page. The paper crackled. Alara Vosmensa, 97, atmospheric engineer, Lagos, Earth. Kepler 442b. She stopped. Silence that followed was not the silence of a pause. It was the silence of an ending. The last name, the final entry, the end of the list that had taken 4 hours and 20 minutes to read. Tanaka Oduya folded the paper. She placed it inside her jacket. She looked at the Kethmorph clerk who withdrew its tablet from the table and returned to its alcove. She looked at the Ool who remained standing, their tendrils still extended, their bioluminescence still faint in the white light. She looked at Orvelk. "Speaker," she said, "I yield the floor." She did not stand. She did not leave. She remained seated in the too small chair at the too high table, and she closed her eyes. Orvelk did not call for the order to be entered into the record. He sat in the silence that followed the last name, and the silence stretched, and the chamber understood, not through argument, not through protest, not through any of the mechanisms the compact had designed for disagreement, that the vote had not been about biology. It had been about whether 11,247 people were worth the time to name, whether they were worth the 4 hours and 20 minutes it took to say their names aloud in a room built to make them disappear, whether the compact, in its architecture of scale and efficiency and procedural speed, had room for the specific weight of a single human life. He spoke finally to the clerk scribes. "Enter the vote into the record with the following amendment. The quarantine is suspended pending independent review. The review will be conducted by a joint panel. Human representation is mandatory." It was not a reversal. It was a pause, but in the compact, pauses were where mercy lived. Tanako Duya opened her eyes. She nodded once. She stood slowly, her knees stiff from the low chair, her back straightening by degrees, and she walked out of the chamber. The Ool followed her. The Kethmorph clerk followed them both, carrying the record. The Vren delegation did not move. The junior delegate, who had mirrored her posture, sat with its hands still flat on the table, staring at the empty human chair, as if waiting for it to speak again. The chamber is empty. The vote concluded 6 hours ago. The ventilation still hums. The lights have dimmed to gray. The seats rise into shadow and vanish. Admiral Yuki Tanako Duya sits alone at the human delegation's table. She has not moved in 6 hours. Her hands rest on the table, empty. The paper pad is gone. She left it on the table when she walked out 12 hours ago, after the vote, after the amendment, after the Ool and the Kethmorph and the silence that had changed everything. The pad contained no names. The names were in the record now. The Kethmorph had them. The Ool had heard them. The chamber, with its oppressive scale and its flattening acoustics, had heard them too. There was no warship. There was no thunder. The title was a lie or a dream or a promise from a different kind of story. The real weapon was the refusal to be compressed into silence. The real power was the list. She rises. She does not look back at the dais. She does not look at the empty seats. She walks to the side passage, the same passage the Kethmorph clerk had used, and she disappears into the corridor beyond. The ventilation continues its hum. The gray light holds steady. The table where she sat remains too low, the acoustics remain too flat, the dampeners remain too strong. But the record exists. The Kethmorph have it, the Ool remember it, and somewhere in the archives of the Interstellar Compact, filed under a session number no one will ever search for, are 11,247 names, read aloud in 4 hours and 20 minutes by a woman who would not yield the floor until every one of them had been spoken. The chamber breathes. For the first time in 340 years, it is not pretending.